Good afternoon. My name is Stephanie Griffin, and I'm the Executive Director of ACMP. I'm so happy all of you came out today, and I'm thrilled to introduce you to ACMP member violist, librarian, and software engineer Phyllis Kaiden, who will give a presentation on JamKazam, Jamulus, and SonoBus. Phyllis, thank you. I'll let you take it from here.
Well, good morning from the West Coast. Good afternoon from everywhere else, I guess, and everywhere else in the mainland of the U.S. I'm so happy to see you all here. I imagine that many of you have experimented a little bit with playing online. Maybe you tried using Zoom. Maybe that didn't work for you so well. And if you live in the Pacific Northwest, the weather got really rainy and cold too soon, and we couldn't play outdoors. So this morning, I'm going to take you on a journey with me of how I came to be playing on all these different apps. And I have a little presentation, so I'm going to share my screen so you can see that, and we'll go from there. Okay, so Stephanie, is that all showing okay?
Yes, it's perfect.
Okay, great. Okay, so today we're going to do a walkthrough, as Stephanie said, of Jamulus, JamKazam, and SonoBus. And in case you have any reason to contact me, either because you want some technical help or you just want to invite me to play, here's my email right there on this first screen. It's also on the very last slide as well. So let's get going. So my journey through to online music was basically like this. In March, there was a lockdown. There was no music allowed. I had this elaborate ACMP play-ins planned. I had 50 people signed up for it. And days before it, I had to cancel everything. So literally this was me. I was crying like Snoopy here. And then I thought, well, wait a minute, there's got to be a better way. And so I got some friends together on Zoom and we tried playing a trio and quickly discovered that only one person could really make a sound at a time. Two people sort of, but not really. And the third one was just completely out of it. So that was a failure. And then I thought, all right, well, let me see what's out there. As a former librarian, I like researching things. And so I went online and I discovered that there are all these kinds of apps out there. And for whatever reason, I chose to start with JamKazam. And I did that first with a friend from Canada. In Victoria, BC. So not quite 200 miles away, probably more like 150 or something like that. And it kind of worked, but there was a noticeable lag between us. And then he got kind of disgusted with JamKazam and tried Jamulus, and I'm like, oh, well, that's better. And then somewhere in the November, December time frame, another app came out called SonoBus, and that's also really good. So these are the three apps that I am using, and I'm a pretty happy violist in terms of that. It's not as good as playing in person, but it's certainly better than not playing together at all. So I want to encourage you all, you can do this. You may need some help, but you absolutely can do this, and there are people who are quite willing to help. So what are these low latency apps that we're talking about? A little bit later, I'll discuss what low latency means, but the applications for online distributed playing of music were primarily written for rock bands and not for classical music, but nevertheless, they work for chamber musicians. And the three I use are listed at the top: JamKazam, Jamulus, and SonoBus, and there are the links that will take you to their home pages, and you can see how long they've been around and what they cost. So of the three, Jamulus and SonoBus are free. They are what is called open source, meaning that there's a community of developers who can work on them, and their work is shared freely, not for money. They usually have a GoFundMe to help them get equipment and things, but you don't have to do that. It's free. JamKazam was free until the beginning of the year, and then they went to a subscription model. You can look on that web page and follow the links to find out how much it costs, but you can still do a free subscription. It's just not very satisfying. It's an hour 4 times a month or something like that. So you might want to upgrade to what's called the Gold subscription, which is available at a 50% discount, so only $50 for the entire year from ACMP. And Stephanie can fill you in on that if you're interested. So just to give them a nod, there are other applications that are out there. They work. I haven't used them, but there are lots of videos and articles about them, and there are new developments all the time. For example, this one called Aloha, which I believe is out of Europe, is working on an app that will work over 5G. Jack Tripp's Studio is one that is gaining popularity with teachers who need a bunch of students to have a plug-and-play kind of minimal investment for a good low-latency application. So they have been doing a lot of beta testing with teachers and in educational settings. And so there we have it. There's kind of a survey of what's out there, but we're going to concentrate on the first 3. So I just want to show you that there are benefits to online jamming. Of course, there's the whole social distance thing. And for me, I live on Vashon Island in the Pacific Northwest, which is about a 15-20-minute ferry ride from Seattle. But you know, there's a lot of traffic in Seattle. There's a bridge that's out. All these things happened. So in order to get anywhere in Seattle, if I didn't need to be socially distanced, takes me 1.5 to 2 hours, and then the same coming home. So being able to just walk over to my music setup and play is such a gift for me. I also feel like my listening skills have improved after playing online, because I have worked hard to have to listen, not only just because I need to stay in time with people, but I really want to hear all the parts, which I can do quite well using the volume controls for all the people in the group. Tempo, you'll find that with latency, there's a lag, there's a little bit of a delay, so that's okay. You kind of learn to cope with that. It's not like being in the same room with someone, but it might be like them being down a 40-foot hallway, or playing with your backs to each other in the corners of a large room. It would be that kind of delay. So really have to pay attention to that continuous flow of music. Don't hesitate. Come in when you think you're supposed to come in. And of course, you can meet new people or not. You could do private sessions with just your favorite chamber musicians. It does very much improve your sniffing capabilities and other ways to give audible signals about when a fermata ends, or new tempo, or whatever you need to signal. And for me, I love this last one, baking while playing. I love to bake, and it's a pandemic, so I learned how to do sourdough bread, and I could let the bread rise or I could let it bake for 40 minutes, which is just fine for playing a quartet. And now we'll talk about what is low latency. We have heard the term latency. What is latency, and what qualifies as low latency as compared to high latency? It's a very technical subject. I'm not going to go deeply into it, but I will give you kind of an overview. So audio latency, there's latency in all kinds of fields, but in audio latencies, it's the delay between the time the sound is created and when the sound is heard. It's usually measured in milliseconds. So how big is a millisecond? 100 milliseconds is a tenth of a second. 500 milliseconds is a half a second. So if we stand 500 feet apart, your sound takes approximately 500 milliseconds to reach me and for my sound to reach you, and you will tell me I'm behind the beat. And that's exactly how it will sound. And that's just with a half second off. With 100 milliseconds, a tenth of a second, we can still hear that, and it will still be somewhat distressing if we're trying to play together. Low latency is generally considered to be 20 to 40 milliseconds. You think I'm nearby. It sounds like I'm in the same room. I'm not behind the beat. If we were to clap our hands, it would sound like we're clapping them together. If we were to play eighth notes together, we would hear them that way, as opposed to higher latency, where I've done these tests where we'll play eighth notes together and we're here, instead of hearing bump, 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 we're hearing bump, 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 bump. It's not at all together, and it can be distressing. So when you are looking to play music online, you do want to look for an application that is capable of handling low latency audio. The prior slide listed some of those. So quickly, what is the path of sound in these applications? From your musical instrument, which is an analog instrument unless you're using an electric violin or cello or something, you're going to go, that analog sound is going to go into your microphone and into your computer. It's going to be converted to digital along that path. So there's some time there. It's going to be sent across the internet, and then it's going to end up in a server or on somebody else's computer, depending on which kind of architecture they use, and into their headphones or back into your headphones. All of that takes time. There's conversion from analog to digital, back from digital to analog. There might be compression along the way. There's internet traffic. There are other things happening on your computer. Maybe your computer is set to do an update just at the time that you're going to start playing. That's kind of disastrous when that happens, but there are other processes that could be running in the background that you're not even aware of. All of these things take time. They add to the path of the sound, which makes for more milliseconds in getting that sound from one place to the other. So in terms of the factors that impact that, it's going to be the speed of your gear, the speed of your internet connection, the distance you are from each other or from a shared server, jitter, which is basically all the notes get packetized, they get put in little packets and they get sent across the internet. Well, they don't necessarily all arrive at the same time or in the correct order, and then there needs to be some processing to put them back in order or decide to drop something. It's all very complex, but those are the kinds of things that are going to be factors. Everybody wants to know, how can I decrease my latency? Well, those are some of the primary factors. Do what you can with the ones you can control. And don't worry about the others like internet rush hour. You can just you don't have any control over that. There is a trade-off. You're either going to have very low latency and maybe not such good audio quality, unless you're lucky and all the stars align and everything works really well, which does happen. It happens probably more frequently than having a disaster during an online session. I would say 95 to 99% of the time when I play online, we can play. There's no reason to stop playing. It works. So the app, what does the app do? It tries to balance all of these things and to stabilize that latency so that you don't have blips, you don't have sound dropping out, all of those kinds of things become much, they're taken care of by the apps, and playing becomes much more feasible. So looking specifically at the 3 low latency apps that I have used, I have put together this little comparison chart, and I'm not going to go through all of these. I will say that JamKazam and Jamulus have been around a lot longer than SonoBus. So they are better known entities. There's more people using them. Some of the big deciding factors on which one to use for different people might be cost. It would definitely be platform. I know a number of musicians that do not have a Windows PC or laptop. They do not have a Mac, any kind of MacBook. They do have an iPad, but Jamulus and JamKazam, which are the 2 most popular apps, don't work on iPads. SonoBus does work on an iPad. I have tested it. It's a little slower than what I get on my Windows machine, but it does work. I've been able to play using an iPad and SonoBus. Now, I'm not going to bore you with all of the details of peer-to-peer versus client-server. I'm going to wave my hands here and give a 2-sentence explanation. That peer-to-peer means that if I'm playing with Stephanie and my friend in Canada, which is very long distance, we're peer-to-peer means my sound is going to each of them and their sound is coming to each of me, and there's no central server that is mixing it up. The client-server model means that our sound is going from our homes to a server. That server is mixing the sound together, compensating for the perceived delay that it has calculated, and sending back the mixture of audio to each of us. So there's a lot more to that architecture, but we can cover that in detail later if you would like. So the maximum number of users is also kind of key for me in terms of which application I will use for different things. When I play duets with my friend in Canada, we really like SonoBus. There's a great clarity of sound. We can be in a private session, just the 2 of us, and it works really well for us. When I want to have a group together, like I had a winter jam where I had 20 people come together to play the Brandenburg Concerto, and I knew that JamKazam wouldn't handle that. And I knew that not all of them had JamKazam, but most of them had Jamulus or could get to Jamulus pretty quickly. And so I chose Jamulus for that particular event. And JamKazam, I find, works really well for smaller groups, preferably groups that are fairly close together. But I have used JamKazam to play with someone, I've done it a number of times now, someone who's in the DC area, and 3 musicians in Seattle, 1 musician in the DC area, works just fine. So you can see that they all have the ability to record. They do not all have built-in video or built-in broadcasting. They all have the ability to do public or private kinds of sessions. The difference being that if it's a public session, anybody could join you. And so somebody who's very eager to play Celtic music or jazz or rock might all of a sudden be in your session, and you need to either mute them or tell them to go away or say, that's interesting, we're not playing that kind of music. So if you were looking to make new friends on these apps, you can certainly do that. The one that's best for that as a social platform is JamKazam. Jamulus and SonoBus do not have social platforms. If you go into public sessions, then you might meet some people that way. And then the ease of setup is somewhat subjective. These are my opinions in terms of ease of setup, sound quality, and which of my friends are using it, which of my mates are using it. Most of them are using Jamulus. Some are using JamKazam, and a few are using SonoBus. They like SonoBus, but it's just too new, and since so many people are already on the other apps, it's not getting as much traction as I think perhaps it deserves. So, equipment. What do you need to make all of this work? So this slide basically shows you that there's kind of a basic setup that you can probably get working. It may or may not sound good depending on your particular gear. But if you want to get started, it's perfectly fine. I recommend that you just start this way, and then you can determine whether or not you need anything more advanced to improve your sound. So we're going to look only at Windows and Mac today. We're not going to look at SonoBus and the iPad. I can answer questions about that if you're interested. So for the internet connection, you must have a broadband connection. Do not try and do this over Wi-Fi. Sure, some of you will be lucky and it will work. But in general, you want the speed of a broadband internet connection. A satellite connection can work. I have a friend who has a satellite connection. I have another friend with a satellite connection. Doesn't work at all because she has a 5-second delay even in Zoom when she's having a Zoom session. And if the weather's bad, it doesn't work well. So broadband internet connection, using an Ethernet cable works great. If your computer does not have the plug for the Ethernet cable, you can purchase an adapter. And here's an adapter for my iPad. It has a little box with a plug for it, and the Ethernet cable goes in there, and then this end goes into my iPad. These things are not very expensive. An Ethernet cable, depending on the length of the cable, they come 5 feet to 100 feet long. I use a 75-foot long cable because I have to route it from the garage and down along the baseboard and up a flight of stairs and around a doorway and under a rug. It's otherwise everybody's tripping over it. So you can get that for maybe $15, $10 even. You also will want to have wired headphones. Here are mine. I like these because they're lightweight. They have a setting for how much pressure they put on my ears. A lot of people like over-the-ear headphones that are better at canceling noise. I found them to be too heavy. And some people just use earbuds. It's fine as long as they are connected by being plugged into your computer. If you're on Windows, you also need to get a piece of software called an ASIO or ASIO driver, audio stream input output. There's a free one called ASIO for all. In fact, most of them are free. And you just can download ASIO for All. There's a link down at the bottom of the page here if you're on Windows, and then install that. And and of course you need the app installed on your computer. The links on earlier slides show you how to get the software. Links on later slides repeat that information. So let's say you try that out and you just aren't getting good sound. The sound is either very faint, either coming to you or going from you, or you just can't turn up the volume well enough or get clarity of sound at that point, or it's just too slow. At that point, you may want to look at some additional equipment, an external microphone. Like I have a condenser mic, and I have a little microphone stand for that clips right onto my stand. I can show you that later. And I have an audio interface box, and this is my audio interface box. It was the least expensive audio interface box I could find back in April when I started doing this. It cost, for the microphone and this interface, audio interface box, which is a Behringer, and a set of headphones. At the time, it only cost me $80. Now that same package costs $110. Still not a huge investment, but you know, this was just a shot in the dark for me when I purchased this. I didn't know that different devices had a much better latency than what I got, but they were also more expensive. So if you want to talk to an expert on what equipment to get, call those folks at Sweetwater. Tell them you're a member of the ACMP. Someone will talk to you, give you excellent advice, and they'll give you a discount. What could be better than that? So if you want to investigate for yourself which devices work best with the different applications, here are some links down at the bottom of this slide that you can follow, and you'll get to lists of, and you can decide how much you want to spend. Or talk to your mates. Maybe they already have something that they say works really well for them. Okay, we're going to go into our first walkthrough, and to do this, I am going to leave the PowerPoint, and I am going to go into JamKazam, at which point I will not be able to hear Stephanie because I have a funky setting on my Windows box for my control of my sound. So I'm going to exit from this and go into JamKazam. Okay, so on the slide that you can no longer see, back here, you'll see that you have to create a login on the JamKazam website. Once you have created the login, you download the app and install it. And then when you click on the app, this is what you get. It looks very much like what you see on the website. So be sure that you are running the actual app and not the browser, and you can know that because it says JamKazam up in the title bar. So here we are in the JamKazam interface, and there are things you have to do first. So first you want to configure who you are and what your audio gear is. And so you can come in here to your profile and set that up. And I'm just going to hit next so that you can see what these what these elements of the profile are. And you can set up, of course, your name. You can set up what instruments you play and your level. That is information that is shown when you are in a session so that people know what instrument you're playing and what your level is. It also shows when people search for other musicians in JamKazam, so they have a better idea of whether or not they need your particular instrument. And of course, more interests that you might have, and more information about you. And I think that's pretty much it. It's long, but you don't have to fill out all of those things. And once you've done that, you have a profile. Great. And now a friend of mine just popped up. He's going to start playing in a session on JamKazam, and that's this person, Jong. And you can see that my friends Brian and Jong are both available, but these other people listed under my friends are not online at the moment. They are offline. So looks like Deborah is coming online, and I am not going to message Deborah. So friends of mine are actively using JamKazam as we're doing this, and but before you can use JamKazam, you need more than a profile. You need to understand your audio gear. And so for that, you need to come in here to your audio gear setup, and I'll click on that. And you can see that I have various configurations set up, but that one of them is active, and that's the one that's for my Behringer audio interface. If you need to add new gear, which you will want to do, even if you're just using your laptop, your Mac, you want to, the first time you're in here, you do want to add new gear because you need to understand your gear. You don't need to watch any videos on this, although you certainly can. You just click next, and you get to the screen that says select and test audio gear, and gives you little hints, which we're going to ignore for the moment, but it's giving you instructions. And it is going to ask me which input device I want to use. And I have a number of things installed on my computer, but I'm going to use my Behringer. If I didn't have any of the advanced and I only had the basic setup, I would use ASIO for all. I'm going to use the Behringer, and it does a little test, and it's saying, hey, green lights, my latency is good, and I can go on to the next thing. But before I do, I want to point out some things. Even if you get yellow here, meaning, all right, it could be better, but it's acceptable. And this next button won't be highlighted unless this is acceptable. If these are red, it will not be acceptable. You're going to have to go back and either choose different gear, or you're going to have to modify, if you're on Windows, your ASIO settings. Here's my Behringer ASIO settings, and you want to make sure you're at 48 kilohertz, and you want as high speed a connection as you can get out of your computer. If I change high speed to normal, notice this changed and my latency is now much worse. So I'm going to go back to high speed and watch this change again. My latency is really great from me to me. So we can close that. And at that point, if I wanted to redo the test, I can hit this resync button. This Frame size is also very important. That is a factor in your latency. You generally want it to be 2.5, if you can get it that low. But if you're hearing a lot of noise and crunchy sounds, you might have to make it higher. Go to next. You can set up additional tracks. I have only one instrument. I don't need any more tracks. And if I was playing guitar and singing along, I would probably want a microphone for my voice and a microphone for my instrument. I am not doing any of that, so I'm going to hit next. And you get to this little turn off direct monitoring. Microphones, not the built-in ones, but the microphone that you purchase, like a condenser mic, has the ability so that you can hear the sound directly back into your headphones without it making any kind of internet journey. But then you're not hearing it in time with all of your mates. So you want to turn that off, and you want to hit the little play button so that you can test that everything is working, and then hit save. Fabulous. Close that out. And now I can go back home. I'm back to my main screen in JamKazam. I need to find some people to play with. I could go and invite some of my friends. I could look for a public session by clicking on the big box that says Find Session, and I can see that yeah, one of my friends is playing, and I could ask to join his session. I'm not going to crash his session, though. I could also look for public jams that are occurring right now, and these are some that are occurring, and I could ask to join those. And I can look for ones that are scheduled in advance to be on at another time or date. And usually there's a description, and you can set all of that up when you schedule these things. But right now, going back to home, I want to create a session. And I want to, first thing I do after setting up my audio gear, I want to do a solo session, just me, so I can make sure I can hear my own sound and that all my indicator lights are looking good. And so there are multiple columns in this session window. The one on the left is your audio inputs. What sound am I sending to the other people? And I can control the volume of that sound by clicking on this volume icon and changing this slider. So I can send less sound to them, or I can send more sound to them. And generally you just want it to be right in the middle. And then I'll close that. You can also mute yourself completely, but I don't want to do that. There is the ability to pan left and right in your headsets, in your headphones. I'm not doing that. So I'm going to close that. And notice that as I hover over things, these informational or setting windows just open. I don't actually even have to click. And so I can hover over this dot, which could be green if all of the latency and everything is great. It could be yellow if it's marginal, or red if it's really not very good at all. And in fact, it might change color as you go through your session, as there's more internet traffic, as people join you, all these different factors, as somebody at home starts to stream video or play video games. But you can see I'm doing pretty well in terms of all of these indicators. And if I'm not sure what they are, I can roll over them, and this box to the right will explain them to me. And you see there, it went from green to yellow as we were speaking and back again. So fortunate to see that. The next column, the personal mix, is how you are hearing the other musicians and yourself. And so same volume control, the same left, right, and the same kinds of information about um, the latency. Now let's say I want to now say, yeah, that's pretty good. I could hear myself. Everything seemed pretty good. I want to invite somebody else to play with me. So I can go to invite musicians, and they don't have to be friends, but it's easier if they already are. And I could invite one of my friends to play with me. I don't see the friend I want. I want to play with Stephanie. So how do I add Stephanie as a friend? I go to the blue box on the right and I go to friends, and she's not a friend already. So let me search for her. Stephanie. Oh, there are lots of Stephanies. I'll need her last name. I don't even have to type all of it, and then I can send Stephanie an invitation to connect with me as a friend. This connect is different from inviting musicians to join your session. This time I'm just inviting her to be my friend. This is the social aspect of JamKazam. So I have sent an invitation to Stephanie, and I can now go down here to notifications, and I can see all kinds of notifications of things that have happened. There's a chat window. I could chat with other people either globally or in my session. I'm not doing either of those at the moment. So now if I go to invite musicians and choose friends, if Stephanie has accepted, which she may not have yet, I can invite someone to play with me. And I'm just going to invite my friend Jeff in Canada because I know he's not on JamKazam. And I click invite. And that sends an invitation to Jeff. And if he was online and available, he would see that invitation right on his screen here. He's offline, so he will get an email from me saying that he's been invited to join. And he can then come in and join this session. So at this point, I think I just want to point out a few other things here in JamKazam. This button here, this resync button, that's a really important button. Sometimes with jitter and other factors on your CPU or on the internet, things get a little bit out of sync. And if you want to bring it back to a baseline syncing, you can click this button. You will hear the sound blank out for a second and then come back. And now I'm green again. So what other things can I do that in JamKazam that are useful? Well, if I want to record, I can click this button. I have never done that, but it's a very convenient way to record. And in fact, if I want to see other musicians while I'm playing and they can see me, I can turn on this video. I am not going to do that because I think I'll screw up Zoom. And frankly, I don't find it that useful. Part of that is my inability to do multiple things at one time. So my head is over here looking at my music stand, and to see the video, I have to look like this. I have to keep turning back and forth. I find that very disturbing. So I'd rather just focus on the music and just let that stream of notes keep going. However, there might be times that you want that video. I'm going to show you that up here in the very upper left, and this is on Windows, on Mac, it would be in your Apple bar where you see the application name. It would be, I think, to the right of the application name. You would see Manage. The same for some of these other menus on the Mac are placed a little differently, but their content is the same. So if I click Manage, there are a lot of more advanced things that I can do to adjust the quality of my sound, the quality of my video, the mix that I have with other people. I can even broadcast my sound to YouTube. I'm not going to do these things now. They are pretty advanced. I am going to show you the audio settings, that there is the streaming console, which allows me to see for each person that I'm playing with this information. I'm going to point out this this compression. So that's another little thing to remember for audio quality. Compressed audio will go over the internet speedier, but it won't have as full a quality of sound, which for string players is often very important, I imagine, for all classical musicians. So if you want that full quality of sound, you can uncheck this. If you don't care and you want to go for latency, you can check it. I mean, you can check that, and then things will be a little faster. You'll have a little lower latency. So there's more up here in Manage, but I think we're going to just call it at that. And at this point, I am going to stop sharing this and get back to Zoom so that I can hear Stephanie.
Can you hear me, Phyllis?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Excellent. Okay, so we're going to open up the first part of our Q&A, questions about the general slides and about JamKazam in particular. So first, Jean, you had 2 questions. Would you like to unmute and ask your questions? If Jean is still there. Okay. If Jean is not, she is here, but I don't know if she hears me. So let's move on for now to Virginia. Virginia Pollard, would you like to ask your question? Okay. Mary Gottdiener.
Hi, I'm here. I think some of these people probably haven't unmuted. It may be why they're not available, but can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so if I can take advantage of the 2 people who weren't around, I want to add an extra question. But my first one is, Phyllis, is whether adding the video when you're doing JamKazam increases latency.
It can slow things down. It's definitely going to take more cycles on your CPU, for example. And that's one of the factors that you have within your control in terms of improving your latency. So I generally do not play with video on.
Right,
but
okay.
It can be very helpful. And if you have great latency and it's not impacting your latency to have the video, go for it.
Okay, and my second question is, from time to time, somebody that I'm playing with has a no audio situation, and I'd like to know what your fix is for that.
Well, I have seen that as well, and it's not really very straightforward. I have a troubleshooting guide at the end of this presentation, and I have that one in there. So let me just say that the first thing I would do in JamKazam is hit that resync button.
Right.
And if that doesn't work, I would probably recommend that the person leave the session and then rejoin. And if that doesn't work, I would probably ask them to just restart JamKazam, like exit from it and restart it.
Okay.
Okay, but there's more you could do. If none of those things work, which are the quick and obvious things to try, you can go back into that audio gear
Yeah.
and make sure that everything is configured correctly. Maybe you just want to click the Add New Gear button and go through that step-by-step wizard that sets up your audio gear to make sure that it's working, that JamKazam thinks it's working. Because if JamKazam doesn't think it's working, it should be telling you the reason why right there in that wizard.
Great. Thank you. Yes.
Good.
Jean has reemerged, it seems. So Jean, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, I had two questions. One is sort of generally, if sometime I sat in on the presentation on Jamulus, and I didn't get my question answered then, but if you could address the security implications, security concerns that you have from downloading this open source software, and then you're going in and you can lurk on people's, these privately created servers that you can go in on. The security implications bother me because I'm really careful about what I download and what I check. And the second question is, with the Ethernet cable, I have the modem and I have my Wi-Fi router. Which one do you plug it into?
I'll take the second question first.
Okay.
You plug it into your router.
Okay.
Okay, first question, security implications. I have not been particularly concerned, but my background includes some software development, and I am trusting that the people who are writing this open source software are doing so in good faith for the purpose of building a community around their application and helping people. So I am assuming a positive viewpoint. Does that mean that one of them could not put in some kind of backdoor that would try and put some terrible thing on my computer? No, I am trusting them. But I am also able in my computer to make sure which pieces of my system that application can access. I can tell it I can say whether or not it can access my microphone, for example. That's about where my understanding of the security ends. So if I were very concerned about open source software, I might not put it on. But frankly, there are so many applications out there that if they are not open source, they have used open source components in their applications. So almost any way you look at it, you're putting open source components on your computer when you install an app.
Okay, I just worry, are the open source people who do this, and I don't know whether they get paid or it's out of the goodness of their heart, but whether they
do not get paid.
Okay, whether they can have enough time to keep ahead of all the hacking out there. I just sort of worry about bad actors.
Yeah, I can understand that. I don't have a better answer for you, though. Sorry.
So it's like a gut check. How much do I want to trust?
Yes, and I will say this, that there is a very active support community for each of these applications, and they each have Facebook groups, and they each have forums or support centers where you can pose this question, and I think they would be able to give a more robust answer than I can. The other thing is, if you're a programmer, you can actually download the code for open source and look through it yourself to see if there's anything nefarious in there.
Well, that is way beyond my capabilities.
It's beyond me too, so I'm with you. I would probably just post a question.
Thank you for addressing the question.
Okay.
From Sandra Corbett. Sandra, are you here? Okay. If Sandra doesn't emerge, how about Vicky?
Hi.
Oh, Sandra, there you are.
Yeah, hi. I'm a drummer, and I wondered, I know most people here are doing chamber music, but because drumming has it's very important that it happens in the second. Like how does that work within these programs?
You know, there are a lot of videos and blog articles written by drummers on how to make this work best for them. And so I think in a lot of groups, they settle on some conventions around you must listen to the drummer. The drummer is setting the tempo, and that's the person you have to be with no matter what. And you might boost the sound of the drummer to make sure that you hear them. There, I imagine you could also work with a metronome for a little while to make sure everybody gets a sense of what's going to happen. But I think it's mostly listen to the drummer, they rule. Okay,
great. Thank you.
Our next question is from Vicky Citron about broadcasting. Vicky, do you want to unmute? There you are.
Hi, you mentioned broadcast in one of the early slides, and I don't know what broadcasting is. Can you explain that?
Oh, go ahead.
I actually have a second question that I didn't write in. I live in a rural area and only have cell connection, so I assume my download speed is 40 megabytes, so I assume that's insufficient.
I'm afraid it probably is.
Yeah.
You can look on their websites at the requirements to see what they recommend.
Okay.
And I think I have seen much higher numbers than that in the recommendations.
Okay.
I live in a rural area too, but not that rural.
So broadcasting.
So many, you may have heard the term live stream, where let's say you are giving a concert and you want people to be watching your concert on YouTube or on Facebook or some other platform while you're doing it. So not recorded, but live. So broadcasting is the process by which you do that. You would take the sound coming out of the application, and instead of just having it go into your ears and the ears of your mates, you would have it sent out to a platform like YouTube or Facebook or wherever you're broadcasting to. It could even be Zoom. Stephanie, did you want to add anything to that?
About broadcasting?
Yeah.
The only thing I would add is that if you decided to do a concert or something more fancy, one of the benefits with JamKazam in particular is that the camera is built in, and you can either get an extra person that you make a broadcaster and you send their feed to, and they broadcast it for you, or there's also the option of hiring JamKazam to do it for you. Like he recently did the big classical music festival, which a number of our ACMP members performed in.
So Stephanie, our 10 minutes is up.
Yes,
I think we should.
Yeah.
Do you want to take one more question, or do you want to go on?
You know what? I think because a number of these questions might apply to the next couple sections too, because we have a lot of general questions. So let's move on, and I will keep the questions in them.
Okay, I'm going to share the screen then. Okay, so not very elegant. I'm just going to just show you that Jamulus is next. Here is the link for download and a link for information on getting started. There's a great video on installing on Mac. And then we're going to look at these other things actually in the app. So let me get that started. First, I want to exit JamKazam. Okay, so you should now all be seeing my Jamulus screen. So I've done the steps that I just mentioned. I have downloaded the app and I've installed it. Jamulus Installation may ask you if you want to install the server as well. You don't need to do that. All you need on your computer is the client. Later on, you might decide you want to set up a server for privacy reasons or for speed reasons, but for now, we're just going to go with the client. Okay, so once you get into the main window here, you'll notice a few things. It's pretty blank, it's pretty sparse, it's very simple. There are menus up at the top, and again on Mac, the menus, there are the same menus, but they'll be in that Apple toolbar. And you can see that on the View menu, there is something called My Profile. And this is much sparser than what we saw on JamKazam. It's just the basics. Thank you very much. And you can change your name at any time. So if I wanted to say PK Vashon for ACMP, I can do that right here. I say which instrument I play, where I'm located, and the level of my skill level, self-assessed. And then I close that. Great, I'm now registered. There's no central directory, there's no list of friends, none of that social media is taking place. It's a very lightweight app, meaning it's not going to have a lot of overhead that's dragging on anything. So then the next thing you need to do is you need to configure your audio. You've set yourself up and now you want to do settings. So down in the lower left of this dark gray window, there are 3 buttons. That one says mute myself, one says settings, and one says chat. So if I click on settings, you'll see a little indicator light comes on and a new window opens up. And I'm going to try and make this bigger, much bigger. And so here we have the settings window. And this is where you're going to set up your device. And so again, we have just like on JamKazam, in Jamulus, we have the sound card device drop down list, and I am going to choose my Behringer audio interface. And that's really all I need to do here. If I were to choose something else, I'll get some additional questions depending on which thing I choose, and I can set up input and output, make sure it's using my built-in mic or my condenser mic, make sure it's using my headphones or the speakers. Do not use your speakers on any of these apps. Speakers generally are going to cause feedback, and it will not be pleasant sounding to your ears. Okay, so I have done that. Now let's look at some of these other things. Down here in the lower left-hand corner, there is something called buffer delay, and you can see mine is set at 2 milliseconds, and I cannot change these things here. It knows that I have an ASIO driver, and so I need to click this ASIO setup and come back to my ASIO setup window, and I can change those buffer sizes again here. I showed that earlier. Changes the sizes of the sample rate, and I of course want it to be high speed as possible. So I'll close that. Oops, I didn't mean to close the whole settings window. So here we have then, this is set. So what does this mean? The smaller the buffer delay, the better your the better your latency. I'm sorry, better your sound quality. I always get those confused. They both work together. You may find that it's impossible for things to work with such a small setting, in which case you can go, you're getting crackling, you're getting whatever. You can make these a little larger and try it until you get a very clear sound. In all of these apps, there is the concept of jitter. I mentioned it earlier. Jitter being that processing of the packets that are sent across the internet and how they don't all arrive at the same time or in the right order. And so they get buffered up, they get held in a parking lot until they all arrive or until enough time has gone by that they get put back together and sent back out or on to their next destination. There is in here this auto checkbox. In general, I would leave that set. The software is going to do its best to calculate what the jitter buffer should be. And in Jamulus, you actually have control over the jitter that is going locally from you to the server, and you have control over the jitter going from the server back to you. So remember, Jamulus is a client-server kind of application, which is why there are references to server throughout this, whereas in JamKazam there were not. So the server, so it has calculated these levels for my jitter buffer. And if you hover over things in Jamulus, it will explain what they are. So that's a really good way of getting some more information. To get started, I would just click auto and leave it at that. If you find that you're getting crackling noises, you can make these buffers a little bit bigger, one notch at a time. In order to do that, you have to unclick auto so that you then can move these around by yourself. But I'm going to put it back on auto. Okay, other factors that impact the quality of the sound and the latency, remember those are always kind of a tug of war between them, is this thing called audio channels. And that's really, is the signal that you're sending out, is it mono or is it stereo? And stereo in Jamulus has two flavors. If your audio interface is only sending one channel, but you want Jamulus to put it into both ears, then you want mono in, stereo out. If your audio interface is sending two channels and you want it going in both ears, then you choose stereo. And if your audio interface, if you just want the fastest setting, you would use mono. I like hearing it in both of my ears, so I'm going with mono in, stereo out. And the audio quality has to do with the compression of the signal. I'm not going to try and explain that. Just go with normal if you're finding that you're getting you're losing, you're clipping, or your little pieces of the music are dropping out. You can come in here and change the audio quality lower. If you've placed it too high, it's going to put more, it's going to use more resources than if it's on normal or low. New client level is set by default to 100. I will talk about this a little later when we're actually in a session. Skin here is just the fancy skin, which is the appearance of this window or a different look. And I'm fine with how it looks right now. I don't feel any need to change that. It doesn't impact anything other than how I'm seeing this window. And that's really all you have to do. Now notice in the bottom here, there are three 3 pieces of information: audio, stream rate, ping time, and overall delay. Right now, those are not doing anything because I am not connected. So I'm going to go get connected. And the way I do that, I don't have to schedule any sessions. I don't have to invite anyone. I have to have made some arrangements beforehand with the people I want to play with, saying, let's meet on Jamulus at such and such a date and time. Or I can just go look and see if there's anyone out there who wants to play some music. So if I look at Seattle Music Allen, I actually know a couple of these people, Lon and Jeff in Canada. They're playing on the Seattle Music Allen, and I'm just going to mute myself here so that they can't hear me when I connect to that server. So, oh, sorry, wrong one. Going back here, clicking connect. I'm going to choose this server. This is what's called a public server. And if you notice, let's see if I can drag this down. Stop. Sorry. Connect. There is a genre here. I need to get rid of this, and I don't know how to get rid of that. Oh, I'm going to move it away. There it is. There's a list, all genres here. There are different categories of servers, and when each person or group that wants to set up a public server initializes it, they can say which category they want things to be in. So if we look in classical, we see a different list, but the list is arranged in order of ping time. Which server is most efficient for my ping time? Ping time being sending a single signal to that server and getting it back. How long does it take? So, you know, none of these are really great. They're kind of acceptable. Jamulus will put in red the ones that it thinks won't work really well for me. So I'm going to go back to this, and you can see here the ones in green. Those would work really pretty well for me. So I am muted, and I'm going to select this one, and I'm going to connect to it. I'm going to mute all these people. They can't hear me, but now I can't hear them either. So what am I seeing? I am seeing all of the musicians who are playing on this server. I am muted. There's a red bar across here indicating I have muted myself. If I unclick mute myself, that red bar goes away. If I click it again, there it comes. You'll also see these little red circles above the name of each person, and I have clicked on the mute button for each of them. There's also this thing called solo. So let's say I wanted to play with Jeff, who's someone I play with often. I can click solo, and he and I would then essentially be in a little room by ourselves, sharing the server, but only we would hear each other. Alternatively, I can mute everybody. The group button here, I never use. I think it's very helpful if you're running a choral rehearsal and you want to group all the altos together and all the sopranos together, and then you can make them louder, or you can increase or decrease their volume as a group instead of one by one. So I think that's great if you're working with a large group where there are sections that you may want to treat as one. But in general, I just want to play with one or more people. I'll solo the people that I want to play with. They will do the same. And then I can adjust their volume. Like my volume is way up here, which it shouldn't be, because I don't need to hear myself that loud. And in fact, it will probably be very distorted if it was up that high. Whereas, you know, I don't know who this is, but I would probably set everybody around in the middle. And you can see these green flashing lights. That means they're playing or talking, most likely playing. And this is their sound. These are their sound indicators. Every now and then somebody goes into the yellow. And if they really had hit maybe a very forte section, or something where they just made a big crunching noise, it might even go into the red. And that would indicate, if it goes all the way into the red and stays in the red, that would indicate that the gain on their microphone is too high and they should turn it down, which I can do with the little knob on my audio interface. If I'm using the microphone in my computer, either on Mac or on Windows, I would have to go into the sound settings for my computer and lower the volume of the microphone in those sound settings. Other things to note here, I mentioned that you can change these volume. They're actually technically called VU meters or faders. Most people just call them sliders, but they're not something you eat. And what I typically do is, once I get on and everyone has said hello, we do a sound check. Everybody, we may tune together, we may play a scale one at a time, so that everyone can hear each person individually and adjust the volume to them. So that's an important point, is that these controls are controlling the mix that you hear in your headphones. It is your personal mix. It is not, if I put my volume way down here, I'm not impacting how everybody else is hearing or not hearing me. This button over here, the mute myself, does turn me off for everybody. So when you come into a session on Jamulus, you might say, I can't hear you, I can't hear you. And you have to remember to come down here and look to see which buttons are clicked. Is anyone muted? Are they soloed with somebody else and not with you? Did you forget to solo them? These are questions that you would ask and figure out. You'd set your balance and away you would go. You would just play. And there's not much more to it. There is a help file. They have a very good software manual. It's simple, easy to read, not too long. You can change your server by coming up here and going to your connection setup, or you could disconnect using this button down here and then clicking the connect button again. And let's say now I want to leave this server, which is a public server, and go to my private server, which is, I've typed in here, vivacenw.com. I did a private server because, for a number of reasons. I live on Vashon Island. My internet connection is not always the best. It takes a very funny route from my house over to Seattle, and most of the people I play with are in the Seattle region. So I wanted a server in downtown Seattle that I could control when it was updated, that I wouldn't have just any random person joining like I randomly joined them, that I could set so that recording is or isn't allowed. I had friends who were very concerned that they were going to be recorded by Jamulus, and they didn't want that. So I have a number of reasons for having a private server, and I can connect to that. And I have set up my Jamulus session on another computer in my house, and that's why I see myself here twice. So again, this is who's in the session. This is a chat window where if I couldn't hear the other person, which I can't, I can type a message here saying, are you there? They might have walked away for a moment, and maybe they just need to see something from me. But you know, this is very useful when you can't hear each other, but once you can hear each other, not so useful. So I can get rid of that window by closing it by hitting that X or clicking this chat indicator here. And I think that is about all I wanted to show you on Jamulus. We're not going to worry too much about other things. Oh, I did want to show you one other thing. Back in the settings window, remember I mentioned these three indicators down here. There are little lights that are going to be changing as packets come and go and my CPU works and I make sounds. And so every now and then this turns red over here, indicating there's a little bit of jitter. Every now and then this turns red, indicating some kind of influence on my latency. And the number I want to look at is the overall delay, which is varying between the high 20s and the 40s. Those are acceptable numbers for playing. My ping time is generally below 20 milliseconds, so that's just great. I don't really pay a lot of attention to the audio stream rate, but it does need to be high enough to handle the stream of audio. So look at these numbers if you're using Jamulus, and if this gets much above 60, you're definitely going to be hearing a latency, and your group will tend to slow down as they wait for each other to come in at the expected times. So I'm going to close this and we can take some questions. Okay, Stephanie, are we back?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Good. So I'm going to start where we left off, and if some of these questions have to do with JamKazam, feel free to ask them. We had two questions, I believe, from Mark Sachs. Mark, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, my questions have to do with how you would set up your computer. I have a computer without a microphone. You know, it has its own microphone. I don't have an external one.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Where would you put it if you have a grand piano? I suspect not.
You have a grand piano. Wow. So you're trying to mic your piano with your laptop?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Well, miking a piano is apparently a very complex topic, which I don't know a lot about, but I have heard others talk about it. And so I guess professionally, when you mic a piano, you might even use multiple mics because you want to get that full sound. If you only have one mic, you would probably put it somewhere on an arm that would reach over your piano. How you do that with a laptop, I'm not sure, unless you had some kind of special platform. You know what I mean? I think miking
no.
a piano is particularly difficult.
I stand warned. The related question is, I'm working with somebody who plays violin and viola. It's your world.
Yeah.
Unlike me, he's got an external microphone, and he has some sort of contact he attaches to the instrument that amplifies it. If you're playing with something like that, and you've just got your own laptop mic, do you have to do anything special to balance that, or is it all done with those little knobs in something like Jamulus to control the relative volume?
I'm not sure I got the question. Would you mind repeating?
Yeah, I'm working with somebody who plays violin and viola, and he
Yes.
has an external mic set up, and he also has some sort of electronic contact he attaches to the instrument that
Oh, a
amplifies it.
pickup. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what it's.
Pickup.
How do you play with something like that to get the right balance between instruments if you've just got this laptop to work with?
Well, I think the balancing is actually on his end. You have to balance what's coming into your headphones in terms of how loud it is in your headphones. In Jamulus, you can control that. But in terms of balancing it on his end, he probably, if he has a pickup and a microphone,
I think so, yeah.
He probably has an audio interface box.
Yeah.
And on the audio interface box, there's a place to plug in multiple inputs. So I just have my microphone plugged in. If I had a pickup on my viola, I would plug my pickup into the other input channel. And then I would have to twiddle the knobs on the top of my audio interface so that it sounds good. In Jamulus, well, in JamKazam, you have a separate setting for a microphone and an instrument input. In Jamulus, he would be mixing them himself. The sound that is going out over the internet, if you recall that audio quality of audio channel of mono, stereo, whatever, he would have to choose the right one for his setup.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
We have both an answer and a question from Andrew Krause. So, and actually, I also want to alert Lynn that Andrew Krause's question is the same as Lynn's about Phyllis's fancy headphones. So, Andrew, would you like to unmute and tell some of us about what you just put in the chat?
Okay, well, what I put in the chat for the person who wanted to record piano, I'm a pianist, and yes, recording a piano is not for the faint of heart. But Onstage Stands makes a laptop holder, which is about $15, I think. I bought mine through Sweetwater, I think, or Bell & Howell Photo, anyway. And you screw it onto the top of a microphone stand, and it provides a stable platform for holding a laptop. And then I would put that, depends if it's a grand piano or an upright piano. If it's an upright piano, I would put it next to me, facing it, so it sort of hears what I do. If it's a grand, I'd put it about 4 feet off the ground and maybe a foot or two from the piano. That's about the best you can do with it, but it has to be that kind of situation to be able to hear what's in the instrument. So that's the answer that I gave. You're welcome.
What was the name of that company again?
Onstage Stands. They make a lot of gear. They're fairly inexpensive. They make microphone stands. We use them a lot when we gig weddings and stuff like that. And they're reasonably priced. And they make one, or you can spend $300 for a fancier one. But I decided I would try the $15 one. I use it when I teach piano lessons. So I've got the laptop up in one Zoom session, and I've got a cell phone camera down in an end of the keyboard, so I can see, they can see my hands, I can see their hands. It's that kind of setup. So anyway, that's just my suggestion to people if they want to record. Let me see. So go ahead.
I'm just saying thanks.
Oh, let me see, Stephanie. So my question was on the port forwarding thing, right?
No, actually, or maybe it was as well. I saw a question earlier. You wanted to know.
Oh, I wanted to know. Okay, now the easier question, Phyllis, is the inexpensive headphones that you have. I have some heavy ones that actually are in the Smithsonian. They're cost for Pro AAAs. My son saw them and he said, "Dad, you have those in your studio." And I said, "I know. Don't tell me again." But anyway, So what do you have there that's lightweight, that's reasonable?
These are also costs. Which model are they? These are the Cost Porta Pro, Portapro.
Got it. Yeah, because the weight of it really does make a difference, and you
Yeah,
don't.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean it really can get to you. I have I hopefully this isn't a hard question, but when I installed JamKazam a while ago. I haven't been able to find any classical musicians to play with me, and now I'm looking at groups of them here, which is kind of refreshing. But when I did, one of the things that they said I had to do was do port forwarding for the router.
Yeah.
Um, yes, you do. You do have to
Well,
do that, right?
I didn't have to do that. It depends on how your router is configured. Um,
Ah,
and if you're unable to connect, meaning you can't get your signal out past your router, you have to
yep.
do something in your router.
Okay, so now comes the fun part. And if this is too much to answer now, then let's hopefully talk about it another time. So JamKazam works for me fine. I've killed the better part of this weekend with Jamulus. The client was like a 10-minute deal. Boom, easy, very, very simple. And I tried installing the server, and that's when things got interesting. So, so now I have it so that two machines on my own network can see that server. The client and the server machine can talk to each other. I've been through a ton of stuff inside the router, and I'm not it. I don't think it's being seen outside, so I could sure use some help with that. If somebody's willing to try and test my server once I bring it back online again, and make it a put it into the directory, right? That's how you make it a public server, is by listing it in the central server directory, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm happy to give that a test. I did not put a server on my own computer for a number of reasons. One, again, I'm on Vashon Island, and people coming here, the signal has to take a longer route than if it just goes to downtown Seattle. Um, and also, my husband works from home and uses a lot of
Your
uh,
bandwidth, sure.
bandwidth. Yeah, I didn't want to disturb his earning a living since I'm retired.
Well, so can you tell us a little bit about what you're renting bandwidth on somebody else's server? They've installed it for you. Is that how it works for you?
So there are various cloud services that allow you to rent a server there, and so I'm using Vultr, VULTR.com, and I could have used Amazon Web Services. It turns out, even though I'm in the Seattle region, the closest physical Amazon server farm is in Oregon,
Uh-huh.
and Vultr had one downtown Seattle, so that's where
And
we went.
what's the pricing? I looked a little bit at the Amazon thing, and I wasn't sure about the pricing. What are you spending a year for this thing?
A year. Um, about $150, but that's because I have chosen a pretty fast server with pretty good capacity. I allow up to 50 sessions on my server, and it the base cost is $5 or $6 a month, but then
Okay.
you pay a penny per hour that the server is up. And since I don't want to be bothered taking it down and bringing it back up again, I just leave it on every day for 25 cents a day.
Oh, so that's not bad at all then.
No, it costs me somewhere in the range of $13.50 a month.
Okay. It would be worth it to have the ability to play with people, I
Yep,
think.
I think
Uh,
it's worth it, and the people in the Seattle region see it as a service. They're not being interrupted by rock musicians. It's a community of classical musicians, and I think they feel pretty safe playing there.
Thank you for that. That's really useful information. I don't know if I can get this thing past. I'm on Verizon Fios, and I'm not sure if I can do it without buying a static IP. Sorry to use another technical term, people that don't know what that is. But that's
Yeah.
almost $50 a month for that. And so that wouldn't be really worthwhile. But somehow or other, JamKazam worked, so I don't understand because that requires port forwarding too. So there's some mystery in the configuration that's just eluding me at this
I
point.
see someone shaking their head.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to make people do that.
I think they have an answer, but I can't tell.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm out. I'll be happy to listen. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, I think
Hi.
we should finish up the rest of the presentation and then take final list of questions.
Before we do, though, William Munich has been waiting. He was the very first person to raise his hand. So could we take a question?
Hi, William.
Hi, William.
Hi. Actually, you know what? I'd like that previous speaker, the gentleman. He alluded for a moment to a configuration where his piano student could see his hands and vice versa. Would you elaborate on that for a minute? I'm a piano teacher too.
Oh, all right. Real quickly, when you teach over Zoom, I recommend two cameras. One camera to be on the body from some small distance away, so you get to see the piano and the person, right? And another camera, and this is just something that somebody showed me when I was in a master class somewhere. Take your cell phone and put it at the end of the keyboard facing in either direction. It doesn't really make any difference. And put Zoom on that and use that and mute it. And that way you've got a view of your hands on the keys and a view of your body so that you can tell if they're hunching over or they're doing something strange like that. Plus you can really zero in on any fingering or hand position thing. So that works really well.
So two different devices attending us the same Zoom meeting.
Yep, 4 in all, 2 for me and 2 for each student.
Oh, cool. What a good idea. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
That's an excellent tip. That's a really good tip.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, let's
Thank
make
you.
music. I mean, this is such a crazy time, but yeah, it just came to me that would be a way I could do both. And once I did that, it's almost as good. The only thing I can't do is like move somebody's hands physically myself or touch them in any way. And there has to be a touch policy that's in writing these days, right? So anyway, that'll help you. Okay.
So
Thanks.
Stephanie, should I go on and do a quick SonoBus?
Please. No, do a big SonoBus.
Do a big SonoBus.
Yeah, that's one we haven't seen yet.
We're kind of running out of time. But fortunately, SonoBus is pretty small. All I have to do is bring it up. Here's the SonoBus slide. Again, it has the links and all these things. There's some really good videos out there and a very good user guide if you're interested. And the SonoBus Facebook group is very active. And so I just need to find my SonoBus. So just a sec. Here it is. Okay, so see if I can stretch this to be any bigger. It's pretty simple. Same old story of you download and you install. The download comes in a zip file. You do need to extract. If you're on Windows, you have to extract things and then click the exe to do the install. But all of this is covered on their website. And you get a simple looking window, and it basically just says connect, and then it has all these other things. So you want to come in here. You don't even really have much of a name in SonoBus. Let me show you what some of the settings are. You can connect, and you can at that point say who you are. But before you do any of that, you'll want to set up your audio, and this should begin to look familiar. It's the same kinds of questions. What sound card device are you going to use? And so what device type is it, and which device is it? So I'm choosing the Behringer again. And again, you can configure your input and your output. I have only one thing, my microphone plugged into my audio interface, so I just have one input channel. If you're using the built-in microphone or something like that, I would end up using one of the Realtek options. And then for output, again, where are you sending that output? I'm just sending it to my headphones. The sample rate, I always go for 48K. It's the fastest. It's what Jamulus requires, and SonoBus works best with that. And that's it. I can again go to the control panel. Looks familiar. It's what you've seen every time I've hit the ASIO. I want that to be high. And then I can go to options. And some of these are important, but they are a little advanced. So again, we have the send quality. And here you have a lot more choices. One of the things I like about SonoBus is it's very rich in the options that it offers, but I don't have to play with them if I don't want to. It will be pretty well configured without my changing things. I opted to change this send quality to be PCM 16, which is the uncompressed format, so that I'm getting the full sound quality. If I wasn't going to do that, if I was having too much latency because of that, I would probably choose 96 as a good size for sending the information. The jitter buffer, you saw some of that in other applications. Well, here it is again, and this time you get to set some initial settings that you didn't have in other applications. In Jamulus, we had auto, and we had a scale that we could set something to. We have something similar here. We could do auto and just let this take care of it for us, or we could do manual and we can change the amounts ourselves. Initial auto is kind of special. It sets the jitter buffer low, which is ideal for sound quality, and then the jitter buffer tends to change as you keep playing, and it creeps up, and you can then reset it very quickly with something I'll show you when we get connected. I am not going to cover any of these other things. They are there for you to play with if you need to. Recording, I have not done a recording from here, but it's very simple. And so that is how you would set up your audio, and then you want to connect. So you click connect, and you can say what is the name of the group you want to connect to. And so I can say, oh, I want to connect to the ACMP group, and I'll keep my name as this. And if I wanted to, I could password protect it. So only people who have the information that the name of the group is ACMP and the password is Viola, that they would need to know those things in order to enter my session. I'm just going to use a group name of ACMP. Now you all know it. If you had SonoBus installed, you could come and connect to ACMP along with me. I have another computer in the house that I have set up a username Snoopy, and they are connected to the ACMP room. So there are two of us in here. I just like in other applications, I can mute that person. I can solo that person, so only Snoopy and I are working together. I can also see, and I'm sorry that the print is so small. Let me see if it will let me make this any bigger. Don't think it will, but it basically, oh, look, somebody joined. I'm just going to mute because I'm getting some feedback from that. Okay, so you can see what their send quality is, and you noticed that I had set it to 96, and I had previously configured this to say when I change the send quality, change it for everybody. Instead of everybody having to do it themselves, I can control that myself. I also have a jitter buffer where I can click on it and it opens another little window that shows me the jitter buffer and the initial audio setting, or I can change that there for this person, not for me. And I can also just hit this left arrow and that little vertical bar moved to the left as it reset the jitter buffer, and then as time goes by it will creep up, and every now and then I can click that arrow if I really want to watch that. And there's a whole bunch of other things that you can set for both your send quality and your receive quality. I don't usually have to play with them. I don't need to open that up in order to hit that left arrow. I could just hit that right there. And I can see latency. If I click on that, it opens up a little statistic, a metric of what the latency was, and it shows me the ping is 3 and outgoing and incoming latency. And here's the control for pan in the left and right ear. Now that's for Snoopy. If I wanted to do some modifications for myself, I have this up here. I'm going to move this out of the way. Oops. Sorry, there we go. So monitor, in general, I don't really want to hear myself very loudly, and depending on the kind of microphone I'm using, I wouldn't even really want this on. But for my setup, I needed to have some volume in monitor. I can also mute myself. I can solo myself. I can hover over all of these things and get explanations of what they are. SonoBus is very precise. It will tell you exact decibels and exact milliseconds. It also offers me a lot of control. Look at this. I have a noise gate and a compressor and a parametric equalizer that I could turn on. And these are things, if you're familiar with audio mixing, which I am not, these are all things that you can do to fine-tune the sound that you are sending. So I was playing with a group and they told me, hey, you know, you're really faint. And I had already turned my gain up. So I went in here and I turned the compressor on and I boosted my signal a little bit. Noise gate, at one point there was a fan or something in my house going on and I wanted to suppress that low level sound, so I used this noise gate to help with that. And you can work with all of these settings to boost bass sounds or boost treble sounds or whatever you want to do. And you have little indicators showing that there's actual sound coming across. And finally, there is this out level down here where I can set reverb, but I'm not interested in reverb, but I can also change this so that I'm sending more or less to my headphones. There is a metronome. There is a recording capability, and you get to specify where you're putting the recording. You can mute all the participants at once or not. And think that is about it. It's very simple, but very powerful. Anytime I want to come back up, I can come in here and change my audio settings. And then when I'm done, I disconnect and I'm done. So I want to stop sharing and come back here. So we are almost out of time, and I apologize. I probably rambled on too much. Just going to take a quick look at the rest of the slides. Stephanie will be sending those out. There's information in there that you may want to look at for troubleshooting and for best practices. And a little bit of guidance on how you choose the app that's right for you. And so with that, I think we have time for a few more questions.
So in terms of questions, we had a couple questions related to video. And one of them just came in from Rhonda Brands about whether Jamulus and SonoBus also have video like JamKazam.
They do not. If you look in the presentation and the comparison slide, you'll see they do not have it. You can use Zoom and you can turn the audio off in Zoom and then you can get video that way. But if it's on the same computer, you're using more CPU cycles, etc. for the video. You may not want to do that.
We also had a question in the chat from C. Schwartz, which I thought was an interesting, maybe perhaps final question was, what would you recommend out of these 3 apps for a beginner? If you were going to try one first, what would be the easiest?
For me, Jamulus is easy and well tested. So that's what I would go with. And usually when I help people get set up, that's what we do. Excellent. Once you have the equipment set up for one, though, you're pretty much set up for all of them.
Excellent. And there's a couple other questions people have their hands raised. Jean and Mary, would you like to quickly ask your questions before we see the rest of the slides?
Yeah, this is Jean. Just a quick question. When I think it was Jamulus you were showing about how you do the self-rating about your musical level of ability, and you selected intermediate. How do the Jamulus categories align with the benchmarks of ACMP? Like what would
they don't. They're just subjective. They're just subjective indicators. I don't think they align at all unless you agree with everybody else that that's what you want to follow. But Jamulus certainly doesn't say use the ACMP definitions.
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out how it would, how accurate you would be about yourself in the Jamulus world as opposed to how you've done it before, like when you have to self-rate for chamber music workshops and things like that.
Yeah, so I don't think it's very important in Jamulus because there is no directory that people are searching. The only time anyone sees that is after you connect and, the people you want to play with already know your playing ability, so they're not going to look at that. So it would only be if you were to connect to a public session with a lot of people that don't know you and they want to see who you are. That's really the only time it would be used.
Okay. Thank you.
I think we have an interesting question about SonoBus from Polly McMurphy. Would you like to ask your question, Polly? Oh, you're muted.
Let me unmute. Okay. I had my hand raised too. Same question. So I play with a pianist who didn't have a computer or iPad or a Mac or a PC, but she has an iPad. So SonoBus is really interesting to me. is SonoBus without an Ethernet cord better than Zoom or FaceTime or, you know, any of those other platforms?
You know, I tried my iPad without an Ethernet connection, just using Wi-Fi, and the latency was really not good. It was too slow. So I got an Ethernet adapter. I can't remember what it cost, $15 maybe.
Yeah.
And I just used this. I plugged the Ethernet cable into this and the other end into my iPad. It's
So-
worth it.
So it was like doing it over Zoom, the latency. I mean, could
They're
you-
not really comparable because Zoom is not a low latency app. It's geared more towards as a conferencing app.
Yeah, I know.
So
I think so, 'cause
SonoBus is a low latency app. It's just that you won't be getting the full benefit of that if you're not using the Ethernet.
Okay, okay, but it would probably be better than what we've been doing.
Absolutely. Better than Zoom.
Okay, great, thanks.
Mary, do you still have a question? I see your hand is still raised.
Yeah, I do. It's quick. I just wanted to ask Phyllis if there's a way that I can use my iPhone microphone app with Jamulus. I've written to them and I never got a response, and I haven't been able to figure out how to do it through settings. So I don't want to take a lot of time on this because it might not be of interest to everybody else, but I love using it on JamKazam.
I don't know
Okay.
the answer to that. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. And then how would I connect to another person on SonoBus? I haven't used it before, but I'm intrigued.
There was that connect button. And so
And
you
but
just
how do I,
click-
and then I can find the person if they're on?
Oh, well, if it's somebody that you've made an appointment to play with, you've agreed ahead of time what the name of the group is going to be, and you both connect to that group.
Oh, like
If you-
Jamulus.
Yes.
Oh, okay. That's great. Thank you so much. This was very helpful.
You're welcome.
I think we have an interesting question as well about Jamulus and privacy from Rhonda Brands. Rhonda, would you like to ask?
Sure, thank you. In Jamulus, I was a little confused about the private server thing. Is there no way to have your group play privately if you don't set up your own private server? Would it always be a public for other people to join at any time?
The server would be public, but on the server, once you're all on the public server, you can all click that solo button, and then you've essentially walled yourself off from the rest of the server.
Oh, I get it. Thank you. That's so helpful. Yep. Great.
We have another question. Jean, do you still have a question, or did you just not lower your hand? Okay, maybe we have another question from Perry. Unless she's not here anymore, we might be done with questions.
Really?
Yeah, if anyone has a question, please pipe up. Is that?
Okay, I'm gonna jump in here. On the Jamulus auto client level, you were gonna come back to that, but is there an optimal level?
Oops. I can't hear you, Phyllis.
I'm trying to remember what I said.
Well, you said you were gonna come back to it and it defaults at 100, but yours was set at
Oh,
4 and yours was
right.
set at 40.
Yes, thank you. So on a public server or on any server with Jamulus, but particularly on public servers, another musician may decide to join the server. And when they join, how loud should they be in your ears? And I set mine at 40 because I have been blasted by people
Okay,
coming onto the server. And so it's really about controlling how loud they are by default.
great. Thank you. I didn't understand what it was.
Yeah, it's kind of tricky.
Okay.
We have another question from Kitty. Kitty, you're muted. So there you go. Oh, still can't hear you, Kitty.
How's this?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. This is actually a piece of information which I discovered the hard way. The people at Apple told me that if you have a MacBook Air, it won't connect to the Ethernet. And that's not so. It will. You just have to get the adapter. But get the USB adapter. Don't get the one that says that it adapts to some other port.
Good point.
I
Thank you
found
for
this
bringing
all out
that
the
up.
hard way.
Yeah, I have a number of friends who found that out the hard way, where I have, you know, half a dozen friends who have MacBook Airs of different vintages. So some are older and some are newer. They have different USB connectors, Thunderbolt, there's Lightning connectors, USB-C, USB 3. You need to know what you have for your model of Mac, and then you find an adapter, an Ethernet adapter with the correct plug. It's very important. You're absolutely right. Thank you for bringing that up.
Excellent. We have a question from Hugh Rosenbaum.
I have problems with flute players in their upper register screeching and crackling. What do you suggest steps to correct?
Oh, well, what I would suggest is maybe they move a little farther away from the microphone, but also they could turn down the gain on their microphone. It probably, which application are you using? Are you using Jamulus or JamKazam?
This is on JamKazam.
On JamKazam. Yeah, if they have a gain knob on an audio interface, you know, like this, they can turn that down, and that should help. And if they don't have a separate audio interface and are using the built-in microphone, they can go into their Mac or Windows settings for sound, find the microphone, and turn down the volume there.
So it's on their side, not on my side.
Not on your side. I mean, you can control it a little bit in that you can control their volume, turn their volume down. But when they hit the high register, it might pierce anyhow. I've played with the flute on Jamulus, and she must have a really good setup. I didn't have any of that.
Another question from Steve Murphy.
Hi, hi Phyllis. Greetings from Port Townsend.
Oh, hi.
Hi. I'm kind of new to this whole electronic sound thing, and the audio interface device is completely new to me. Never saw it, never heard of it before. Is there but it explains why my JamKazam doesn't. So I wondered if there's a way I can, what's a good way to research that, or if, because it looks like there's pricing all over the place.
There is. Well, there are two ways that I suggest in the presentation. And so one is to explore it yourself, watch some videos, look at the lists that I have linked there. Sorry, my dogs are upset about something. So that's one way, is you kind of investigate your own. And another way would be to call an expert like Sweetwater and have them help you.
Okay. And can you tell us again what kind of what you're using?
I'm using a Behringer UM2, which is the lowest of the low-end audio interfaces.
Okay, thank you.
I just realized that Selma Joselle had a question from earlier about the ASIO for all and whether or not you need it for Mac. Selma, are you there? Would you like to ask your question?
Yes, I am. I was wondering, when you're doing audio setup, I have a MacBook Air and I have an Ethernet adapter, and I'm playing quite well. I'm not sure if I set up ASIO for all or not. Do I need to?
You do not. ASIO the ASIO drivers are really only for Windows.
Oh, okay.
A Mac has a built-in core audio that already is very sufficient for handling audio streaming. Windows machines, not so much. So to bridge
Okay,
the
thank
gap
you.
on Windows machine, you use an ASIO driver. ASIO for all being the generic one.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I guess you answered the other question I had about how to connect on SonoBus, but you have to do that ahead of time. Make arrangements with somebody.
Yeah, make an arrangement. Or you can go try and find a public server. I just showed you the private one, but you can not server, public group. You can, there is the concept of a public group that you could go and see who's out there playing things.
Okay, thank you. This was very informative, and I thank you all for setting it up.
Oh, you're welcome.
We have one more question from, sorry, C. Schwartz. I do not know your first name.
Hi, it's Cornelia. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Cornelia.
I came late, unfortunately. Are you going to put a link so we can watch this again later?
Yes, I will be archiving the video from this presentation in the next few days on ACMP's YouTube channel. Please continue to check the article I've created on the front page of ACMP's website called Online Chamber Music Resources at a Glance, where I will post the link to this video, as well as a link to Phyllis's amazing slides from this presentation. Phyllis, I can't thank you enough for this. This was a fantastic presentation, organized in only the way a violist and librarian could do. Thank you, Phyllis. Is there anything you'd like to say before we sign off?
I am going to share my last slide. So here we go. And so here's the things that we didn't talk about, but I wasn't really going to talk about them. I was just going to show them to you. And here you go. Thank you very much for attending. It can be done. And what I have found is that once you do it, you're eager to help others and you're absolutely capable of doing so. It doesn't take more than a couple of times before you feel a whole lot more confident. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Phyllis. And thanks again to all of you for coming. I hope to meet some of you and hear some of you online soon. If you haven't already done so, please do consider getting yourselves geared up for JamKazam, Jamulus, or SonoBus in time for ACMP's first ever virtual worldwide play-in on March 20th and 21st. Thank you.